Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Advocacy. We're happy to have Chris McLeod with us. We're also happy to have my co-hosts Madeline and Bunny with us.
Hello.
So from there, we're gonna just jump right into our conversations. With Chris, we're gonna talk mainly about a speech impediment that Chris grew up with, and how he's allowed it to allow him to advocate for himself, and he's allowed that to empower him. So from there, Chris, we're gonna turn it over to you. Can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Sure, of course, I'd be happy to. So first, I'd like to say thank you uh, to all of you for the invitation, just to be able to share my story, and I appreciate it, and I hope um, I am able to offer some value, and I share my experience. I started. I am someone who is a person who stutters. Uh, in that statement, it sounds very small as an intro, but it took me honestly 40 something years to actually be able to say that to people. The reason why is because for so long, I did not, so for so long, I did not accept myself as a person who stuttered. I actually, I started to stutter at the age of 3. And it's funny because I remember a time that I did not stutter. And there was one day, I should say that it was one morning that I had a dream. And I would say, so it was really a nightmare. And that morning, and I remember the nightmare clearly that I was in my grandparents' apartment in the Bronx. I was with my mom in Providence, Rhode Island at the time. That's where I was born, but I grew up in the Bronx. So the dream was I was in my grandparents' apartment in the Bronx playing in the living room, and there was a snake that came out from the china cabinet, and the snake came close to me, and it leapt up to strike me, and I woke out of my dream as a 3-year-old, scared to death that morning. And I went into my I went into the kitchen um to say to say good morning to my mother, and she turned, she said, "Hey Chris, good morning." And I was like, good, 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 good. And it was hard for me to get the words out, and she couldn't understand what it was. I couldn't understand what it was. And then from that point on, I stuttered, and I went through life as a first as a child who stuttered, then as a teenager and a young man and a man who stuttered. And at different points of my life, I had different experiences. It was not necessarily something we talked about in my family. So I grew up on the Jamaican side of my family. So my mom was Jamaican and my dad's Nigerian. I grew up on the Jamaican side, and if you know anything about West Indian cultures that are actually quite similar to African cultures, there's a lot of pride there, and you don't really want to give knowledge or give space or acknowledge those things that might cause you stress, grief, or shame as a family. So we didn't really talk about it, although there were things like it would come out if my mother was if my mother was upset at me. She would call me stammer brain if I was, if she was upset at me, sometimes. Or my grandmother, I remember there was a time that like it actually came out that like she didn't really want me coming to her church because she didn't want for people at her church to like hear me stutter or see that I stuttered. But I share those things not to say, oh my God, like my childhood was so awful and didn't have family that supported me. Keep in mind, these are two of the strongest, most supportive women that really impacted my life. But but they were flawed. They were human beings, you know what I mean? They were people, and they didn't know how to deal with things that they were uncomfortable with. But fast forward,
But did you feel like, real quick, Chris?
yeah.
I'm sitting here. I hear you say that, but how did you feel as a child? I know you're speaking from a grown man now, but how did you feel as a child when, in some ways, did you realize that they didn't want you to come around certain people because they felt like the stuttering was a sign of imperfection? If you did realize that, how did you feel at that time as a child, knowing that?
Well, I felt awful. You know? Yeah,
Yeah, especially from your parents' standpoint, like, because if
yeah. I
nobody
mean,
else will accept you, your family should.
yeah, but I laugh about it, right? Unfortunately, like at least in the West Indian, like in sort of Jamaican culture, that actually is a part of life of just growing up with painful stuff, like and being hurt by people real close to you. Like that's just par for the course. You know what I mean? Like listen, it's toxic, it's dysfunctional, it is not the way to go. Let me tell everybody who's listening, this is not good. Okay, this is not the way to be. But it was something that I was just sort of like, it was just something that just became just sort of a part of it, right? It was just sort of a part of what as part of I should say it was my norm, right? It was my norm, and it was something that I normalized, right? Kind of for better or worse. Um, but at the same time, I had a family that was very strong, who supported me through school, who cheered me on in the things that I was doing well. Like my grandmother is a person that would step in for me as my mother to fill out my school paperwork when I was going to independent school on an academic scholarship. And my mother was not in the place to really like fill out the paperwork and stay on top of that stuff. It was my grandmother that did that, right? From an early age. And she made sure I was able to get through some of these milestones. So, you got to take the good with the bad.
It grows your skin very thick when you can
It
grow up
does.
like that. So it kind of it helps you to tolerate the outsiders a little bit more. Chris,
Yeah.
I've got so many questions for you, but I'm gonna slow walk these questions as we have this conversation. But when you said that you grew up with your Jamaican side of the family versus your Nigerian side of the family, because I'm
Mhm.
thinking if you would have grown up with your Nigerian side of the family, what would life have been for you? Because talk about how tough the Jamaicans are, the Nigerians are equally tough when you have any type of disability. So, what do you think your
Yeah.
life would have been like?
Yeah. I mean, so this is interesting because I have not ever talked about this part of my story. So this is actually going to be the first forum that I'm talking about this part of my story. But
Are you
I got con
comfortable talking about it though, Chris? Are you comfortable?
I am
Okay.
all bare soul to the wind. Let's go with it.
Okay.
Let's rock.
Okay.
Let's rock.
Okay. We go on. We go on. We in the car with you.
We rock. So it's interesting. I'm trying to tell this in a very clear and succinct way, so it's not going weaving and going around and around. But I did not really have a relationship with my dad until my mother passed. So my mother passed exactly 6 weeks after my first daughter was born. Right, she passed. When she was sort of on the decline, and it happened fast, I got in contact with my dad in Nigeria and told him. This then sort of caused him to be like, all right, like now's the time to really like reconnect and build this. He connected me with my family, my Nigerian side that's in London. And one of my aunts, he's the oldest out of five. He's got four younger sisters, and one of his sisters is kind of like the matriarch. And so I connected with her in London, and she started telling me about things about my childhood that I did not know. Like, and so to your point about what it could have been, I did not know that soon in my early years that my grandmother on my Nigerian side was actually trying to get my dad to bring me from the US to live with her in Nigeria. She wanted to raise me, my grandmother on my dad's side. She wanted to raise me and one of my cousins together. And that like they had talked to my mom, and my mom being the true Jamaican, she like she cussed them out up ways, down ways, sideways, and, and said in not so many words, absolutely not. I'm giving you the clean, succinct version. But that made me feel like, in a way, that was actually very heartwarming to know that at a young age, I was wanted. I was wanted, right? I was wanted, like full stop. Even by folks that I didn't even know about. I didn't even know that, like, and apparently throughout my childhood, they were trying to get me. They were trying to like contact my mom and be like, we want him, like, or I should say like they wanted for me to just come visit, and she didn't trust it. So she was like, no, he's not even gonna come for a visit. So she was like, he's
Mama
not
did
even.
right because Mama knew if
Yeah,
you
she did.
went, you was
She
not
did.
coming back.
Yeah. But I do wonder what it would have been like, in the sense where, but then also too, as I got to know my Nigerian side, they're so similar to my West Indian side. I'm like, you know what? It probably would have been a similar experience, right? Maybe some differences, but there's pride there too, right? And there's a lot of pride, on the African side. So yeah, that's definitely what I thought about. But but I went through my life being a person who stuttered, who did not really acknowledge or share to people that I stuttered. Like my friends knew it was something that sort of like was like a it was kind of like an elephant in the room that no one really would acknowledge or sort of give voice to, and I didn't really do it because it just made me feel uncomfortable. um, but but everything came to a head. I went through my life, like I said, college. I didn't raise my hand a lot in college. I had like these big classes and these big lecture halls. I never really raised my hand. I paid attention, and I would go to the professors in office hours and feel more comfortable talking there, but not raising my hand in front of like 100 other like classmates. Um, as I got older, it's like interviews. I was super nervous and scared on the interviews. I would stutter on interviews or try as hard as I could to not stutter on interviews, and hope that even if they did hear it, it wasn't so bad that it was obvious. But everything came to a head in 2020. 2020 is when we had gotten into the pandemic and the world shut down and everything moved to Zoom. And when everything moved to Zoom, that is a nightmare for people who stutter. Being on a virtual camera like this, and yeah, and like being sort of on Zoom meetings and calls, absolute nightmare for people who stutter because you're on the spot, right?
And
Like
that's
you
what I
see
was
those.
gonna ask. Tell me
Yep.
why? Because
Yep.
The
yeah,
reason
why?
why, yeah,
Mm.
well, so really one of the things to understand is that for people who stutter, what triggers what triggers the stutter is, well, I should say what and well, I'll give this as a caveat. As I've sort of been learning in these recent years, there actually is a spectrum of stuttering. There's lots of
Mhm,
different types of stutters.
mhm.
There's lots of there's there's lots of different variations of what is a natural stutter for people. For me, um, the more comfortable that I am in sort of like public settings or around people is the less I tend to stutter. Um, Conversely, the more nervous I am, is the more I will stutter. I know, like even on this call, I'm not stuttering nearly as much as I I have stutter or can stutter. You know what I'm saying? Like I can send you some recordings of some calls, and I'll be like, listen, if you want to see a stutter, watch this. Like, I
Mhm.
could show you, I could show you some stuttering, right? But it's but in 2020, the reason why for people who stutter, for the reason why Zoom is so bad is because it's so hard, so challenging, is because it puts you on the spot. And for a person who stutters, a lot of times you are so anxious about your stutter. Um, like you feel such anxiety and shame and like pending embarrassment that like you're afraid to stutter, and you're afraid to stutter on sort of what seems like you're on a public stage. So the fear, I realized when I started to, it became so bad that I was on Zoom calls and could not even really speak. And so I decided to go seek out a speech therapist.
Okay.
And when I spoke to the speech therapist, that was the first time I actually had, that was honestly the first time I actually had real speech therapy, like professional speech therapy. And one of the aha moments for me and for her was that the hardest part for me wasn't the actual stutter itself, it was the fear of stuttering. And once I could address my fear of stuttering, that made me feel more comfortable to be more fluent when I spoke. And so the journey was, and so the journey went from not trying to, it went from me not trying to stutter to me being more comfortable stuttering. And it wasn't me like, and so now the time I speak, I try to, it's like I'm telling myself, like, it's okay to stutter. You're going to stutter. It's
Mhm.
okay. If and when you do, just keep going. But that fear of that like stutter, so that first stutter or people, and so a big thing in sort of the stuttering community for people who stutters to advertise, right? And advertise means when you are about to be on a call or about to speak to somebody, you tell them and say, hey, I just wanted to let you know that I'm a person who stutters. And so if I say something that you don't understand, please tell me. I'll be happy to repeat myself. I started to do that on interviews, right? I started to do that on interviews, started to do that on calls, and it just did wonders. Just did wonders.
I was going to
Um,
say that should really make you feel comfortable to go ahead and let people know what to expect. And a lot of times, my grandson is autistic, and I have to do that as well
right.
when I am introducing him to someone that does not know him. Like, hey, he's autistic,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
so I think that that's a good thing.
Yeah. 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 And you realize that I realized that me doing that was not really for them, it was for me, right?
Mhm.
Like me telling them that I'm a person who stutters, it helped. What it did for me was it took that fear out of the play. It took that fear out of the picture. So now I'm like, so now I'm not steady thinking about, oh, I need to make sure I don't stutter, so because I don't want to be found out, right? Like now I've actually set it up front. So now people know. So now for me, now I know they know. So if they hear me stutter, I'm like, okay, yeah, I told them that. I told them it was gonna happen. So we good to go, right? But it took me a long time, to get
That's what I'm
like.
saying. Because you saying just 2020. How old were you? I mean, not putting your age out there, but I'm.
Well, you might as well, right? I mean, you might as well be there. I was 2020. I was well, I'm 40. I'm about to be 40, 49. So like 45. I think it was
Wow.
I think it
Wow.
was about 45. So
So I want to
yeah,
go back to your schooling though, because
Okay.
Listen,
I'm
we
not even
want to
gonna
go.
lie,
We
Chris.
we just want to know a
Yes.
whole lot of
I
stuff.
got a lot of questions. First of all, I mean, you are a nice, pretty package put together. So I
you
love the
too.
fact that you
You sweet talking me.
overcame. No, I do. I like the fact that you overcame, because I mean, I don't see the stuttering, but of course, you have to be comfortable with where you are. And I will say for me, I don't like talking in front of people. So I
Right.
don't think I have a stuttering disability. I don't know if that's what you guys would say.
Mm,
But when I got in front of people, I had to talk myself out of feeling uncomfortable in front of people. So a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the times I would use the wrong synonym. I would
yeah.
say,
Right.
how
Yeah.
they say, well, are you supposed to do? And I'd be like, are you supposed to does this? And I'd be like, oh Lord, what am I saying? So I found that I was uncomfortable, but a lot of the times what I had to do is say, Paula, they're no better than you. So I,
Right.
I get
Right.
what you're saying, like you had to be calm, but I do want to go, but I wanted to say that real quick. But I wanted to go back to your schooling. How did you so did your mom now pursue any help for you in
That's my
schooling with the
bad.
IEPs in place back then? Or what did they do to kind of get you any help when you were young?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Even if
So
it was in secret. I mean, because I know you
yeah.
like you saying that that was something that they may not have
Yeah.
wanted everybody to know. Yeah.
Yeah. So I went to public schools in the South Bronx. When I was in elementary school, they knew I had a stutter, um, but I think they didn't really put a lot of um, a lot of attention to it because I was like one of the top students in the school, right? So I think they were like, "Yeah, he stutters," but but let me tell you, ironically though, I talked a lot in class. Like I was like, I was like, listen, for a kid who studies, he talks a lot. You know what I'm saying? Like I talked a lot in class, and the main complaint teachers always had was like to my mother was lit like they would go to her and be like, listen, the problem is that Chris talks in class, but the reason why that's a problem is that he's hurting other kids. He's getting hundreds and excellence, but our fear is that he's like hurting the other kids. So we need to get him to stop talking. But the thing that happened is that my mother talked to the principal and the folks at the school, and they were talking about, yeah, I think we would, I think like we can get him some support. I started seeing, and I'll be honest with you. I don't think like she wasn't the speech language. She wasn't a. I don't think she was a certified speech language pathologist. But I started seeing like the special ed. Like she was like the special ed coordinator or something in the public school in the South Bronx. I think she actually had some. I think she had some. I think she had some experiences. I think she had some experience in like speech language, you know, like pathology. I think she had that, but she definitely is somebody who I would see. I would go to her like maybe once or twice a week, and we'd sit and do different types of like breathing exercises, or like we go through worse. But honestly, like that was it. In like elementary school, this no, I'm sorry, it was more like middle school. It was, yeah, it was in middle school. um I mean, but that's really it. Like that's all I had. And like I said, she wasn't necessarily a speech language pathologist, but she was like the special ed coordinator at the school who had some experience in that.
Question: As in even in school up to high school, how was your social life as far as if you met a girl or
Mm,
whatever? How was that?
That's a very good question. So, uh, one of the things I talked about when I went to I did a session at the National Stuttering Association conference for the first time in 2020. My presentation, I talked about my journey. One of the things I talked about was was the experience. The whole thing was actually talking about the experience of being a black man who stutters and the things I went through at different parts of my life. I talked about dating, right? That was one of the things I talked about. And one of the fears that I had was that like I would one of the fears I had is that I would not be able to meet someone and really sort of have like real genuine love because they might not be able to get past my stutter. I didn't I actually can't say I didn't really have a hard time like meeting or dating folks.
Mhm.
But I did have that sort of fear all the time, thoughts about that. But what was interesting was that as a part of my speech therapy, when I s- when I started it in like late, I think I started it in 2020 or 21. One of the things the speech therapist told me or asked me was is I should say she gave me an assignment and she told me to go home and ask my wife about my stutter. And I was like, well, I was like, huh? I said, like, what do you mean? She said, um, I want you to go home and ask her um, what she thought about you about your stutter and what sort of she felt when you guys met and you were dating. And I was like, all right. I said, I really ever did that, but okay, do that. So yeah, I came home. I came home and and I asked her and I said, hey, I said, and by this time she knew I was seeing like a speech therapist. And so I had asked her and say, hey, I said, I've been talking to the therapist and she really wants me to like talk to folks that are close in my life and my family about my stutter. And I said, I said, I know this is something we've never really talked about before. I said, but what did you think when we met and you saw that I stuttered? And she immediately like replied and said, well, to be honest, actually I thought it was kind of cute. She was like she was like, it made you unique. And I was like, oh, I was like, okay. I said, man, that warmed my heart because here I was thinking the stutter was going to be something that like was sort of like a hindrance. And then lo and behold, it was a competitive advantage out here in these streets. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's good. Yeah.
So that was, yeah, that was sort of how that was with sort of like the social life. Um, like I had, so I also pledged a fraternity. So I pledged Kappa Alpha Psi. And when I was pledging, that really was an interesting experience because like because I had to get into a certain mindset when I was pledging, and that mindset was something that I had to stay in a certain mindset because if I did not stay in that mindset, it was I would actually be I would stutter and it would mean it would be a very interesting and eventful evening. so so I had to make sure I stayed in a certain
I
kind
can
of
imagine.
certain certain mindset, certain energy.
Right. Yeah.
So when you had a job, how did you approach it? And I first of all, I applaud you at 45 even pursuing help with the stuttering because I
Mhm.
think, and I don't know if anybody else feels like that, but as you get older, you kind of want to challenge the things that you have been kind of daring to,
Mhm.
kind of face. It's like some of those things you're like, well, why do I do that? And I will say that I'm glad you did mention about the different degrees, because I had a lady that stuttered in my office. And this is another question I want to ask you.
Mhm.
When she stuttered, I mean, we would just stand and we didn't know what to say, because hers was on like it was every word, and sometimes
It was
she would
severe.
take maybe 5 minutes just to get out one simple
Yeah.
sentence. How
Mm-hmm.
would you expect for people, like, the first question is about the professional side, and then
Mm-hmm.
for us that are, interacting with a person that constantly stutters, what is an appropriate reaction? Because I know some
Mm-hmm.
people would try to finish their sentences. I
That's
didn't
right.
do that.
That's right.
Other people, it's like, do you stare at them? I mean, what do you look away?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do to, because sometimes it can
Mm-hmm.
be uncomfortable for the person that's delivering the conversation, and then the person that's receiving it. So those are my two
Right.
questions.
Those are phenomenal questions. Um, I, the first thing I would say is, if you are someone who is a listener and there's someone speaking to you that is stuttering, and they're having, it's called blocks, right? And they're having blocks. One, do not finish their sentence. That's actually a very it's a I want to use the word disrespectful, but I don't want to use it, because when people do it, they're not trying to be disrespectful, right? They're actually are trying to be helpful. They're trying to say, no, I'm actually being helpful. But actually, the thing you want to do is just really, really give that person the space and time to get their words out. Don't say things like, it's okay, take your time. Like, don't say nothing like that. Just, just stay there and allow them to uh, allow their stutter to be what it is, and for them to work through it. Because I assure you, what's going in their mind sometimes is 10 times more harsh than what you might be thinking, right? And so it's important to let folks know that they have the space and the time. Their words matter. Don't matter how long they take to come out, right? Their words matter. And yeah, like, there could be times where it feels like it's like an awkward amount of time, right? That you're sort of like sitting there as the person's like trying to get through words, through stuttering. Um, but that's sort of their way of speaking. So just, I would say, allow them, give them the time, time to do it.
That was a really good question, Paula, because I often wanted to know in that same type of setting how people would react to someone with a more severe stuttering. I grew up in junior high school. We had one person in there that stuttered, and she had a tick with it.
Mm,
Um, and we didn't know anything about stuttering. It wasn't something
hmm
that was widely talked about. Just didn't understand it. And she didn't have a severe stuttering, but it would take her a little bit to say her words. Um, we didn't bully. She didn't get bullied. No one really teased her, and I think because we didn't know what it was.
mm,
We we
hmm
we really stayed around her, trying to figure out, why do you do this? And we never asked her, like, where does stuttering come from? How is a person born with this? Is it something that's developed? We never knew. Like I said, we were in junior high school, so we really became her friend. We stayed around her a lot. We kind of protected her. If it took her a long time, and I'm an adult now, and I hear you say don't finish the sentences. Oh, we finished all of her
Oh
sentences
yeah, I know.
because
But it was
we
coming from a
just
good place though.
it
But you
it was
wanted to be.
yeah, it came from a good place because we just did not know, and we knew she wanted to say, I want a
Right.
Snickers bar. We knew that's what she wanted, so we would tell the ice cream man she wanted a Snickers bar. Give her a Snickers bar. So I'm glad today, I'm today's years old, to hear that you don't finish the person's sentence. You
And I can
say it,
imagine you, but
be like, I'm gonna help you. What do you want? I'm gonna help you. But in all seriousness, like, where does stuttering come from? Is that
such a
like,
such a good question. Such
yeah.
a good question. Um, I am the first in my family to stutter. And I realized that there are some people who have it as sort of a hereditary trait, you might say, in their family. Like they're like, it's in their family. And they actually, there are folks who sort of, who have, who from like early ages, as they sort of started talking, like they stuttered, right? But then there are folks that this was interesting at like the last conference I went, the last National Stuttering Association conference I went to that. So I was asked to come back and present the next year as well. I did a session called Stuttering While Black. In that session, I talked again about sort of the journey and self-discovery. The reason why I bring that up is because there were people who stood up and were sharing their story throughout that conference about how and when they started to stutter. And I realized there's some folks who said, who actually started to stutter as a result of trauma in their life. There was like, so for me, it was the nightmare, right? At 3. For other people, I heard this one young man say that he started to stutter like at around 15, soon after his parents divorced, right? I heard this other young lady talk about she started to stutter when one of her parents died, one of her parents passed away, right? So there's this like trauma. That actually started to this was maybe 2 years ago. I started to think to myself, I started to think and I was like, I know, I said, I know what happened. I know I started to stutter from that nightmare. Like like that was the physical, the first sort of like that was sort of the first thing that made the physical change in me. But then I started to think, and this is within the past 2 years. I started to think to myself, I was like, I said, but what was that? I said, what else might have been happening around that time of my life, at 3 years old when I had that nightmare? Like, what else
Mm.
was going on? And and what occurred to me, and I have not confirmed this. I haven't been to a psychologist or anything yet, though I know I probably will and should. But when that morning I had that nightmare and I sort of went to my mother, started to stutter, I remember that it was just her and I. My dad had just left us. Like he had just now, coincidental, right? That was around the time that like, because I remember he was with us, and then one day he wasn't, and I remember around that time that was like that was around the time that he left, and I went, and so I've kind of wondered, okay, the stuttering came from sort of the mental emotional trauma of the nightmare. But what might have caused that nightmare?
Right.
Right? Like, like what are some deep-seated things that might have caused that nightmare where I didn't feel protected anymore, right? And that manifested itself, in my, like sort of in my nightmare because I didn't feel protected anymore, right? Like I don't know how to articulate that because I'm 3 years old, you know. But that's something I've actually like thought about. So really to your question, buddy, which is a great question about how it started. That actually, like that question, I've seen that question answered in lots of different ways. And I've seen it actually be rooted from lots of different things, as well.
So I know this may sound weird. As far as you said, that a lot of them have with the trauma start stuttering. Just like some kids, I've taught selective mutism. When there was a trauma in their life, they didn't talk. They stopped talking. But
Hmm.
as they went through therapy, they were able to speak. So, is it is it possible that it can change, reverse, if you went through therapy to help with your trauma as far as the
So
study?
yeah, well, okay, let me say this. I am not a professional researcher,
Yeah.
and I can't really kind of speak. I can't speak to the clinical side, right, of stuttering. What I can speak to is really kind of is really anecdotally is what I can
Mhm.
speak to. Conversations I've had with folks um, out there in the stuttering space. Um, there are, so remember I was saying there are folks that like that stuttering is a spectrum. What I've realized is that who can, there are folks who can actually consciously not stutter. They're called covert stutter. I guess like that's the word, but they when you hear them speak, you don't hear any stutter at all. But that's not because they are not a stutter. They're not a stutterer. It's because they actually can hide it. They can consciously hide it. There are people who cannot hide their stutter. The same spectrum, like this is the spectrum. So to your question, where can it be reversed? I've heard there are a lot of things I'm sure that we've all heard and sort of seen where like some people say, oh yeah, I had it when I was a kid, but I outgrew it as I got older, right?
Mhm.
Um, that's true too. Um, but then there are also folks who have it and they work really hard in speech therapy to get more comfortable saying hard syllables. And so they're able to develop they're able to develop enough of a normal way of speaking because of quote unquote normal way of speaking because of the work they've done in speech therapy. So it sounds like they don't stutter, sound like they have reversed their stutter. But then you have folks who actually gone through speech therapy, but they still stutter, but they stutter comfortably for them, right? For them, it's a more comfortable type of stutter where they are. But for you as the listener, it's like, oh man, you sound like you really stutter and you really having a hard time. But for them, it's like, no, this is actually like the result of lots of hard work. So yeah, I won't say there's one in particular, like people kind of like, or at least I can't speak to the trauma piece where people have gone through therapy and have sort of addressed their trauma and then that caused them to not stutter anymore.
Mhm.
I can't speak specifically to that, but I can speak to, like I said, the people that I've met, which is just crazy to me that they can actually control, they can, for lack of a better word, they can control their stutter.
Mhm.
Chris, I do have a question. How would you describe your stuttering? Because I can hear it at certain times. I can
Hmm.
see how you in my mind you're attempting to control certain words that you're saying. So how would you describe your stuttering?
I don't know if there's a word for it. I don't know if there's like different sort of clinical terms for different types of, if the different types of stuttering have been codified or not. I do know there's certain kind of behaviors that are associated with stuttering, right? And so sort of like, so I think it was you, Paula, that talked about a tick, or somebody had a tick, or
Yes.
was it you, Bunny?
Mm-hmm.
Was it you, Bunny?
Mm-hmm.
Talked
Yes.
about some, yeah. Some folks will have a tick. For me, Um, my eyes tend to roll back in my head when I'm going through a stutter, right?
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
trying to be more conscious of that. Where like I'm trying to be like, all right, don't at least just keep your eyes closed through the stutter. Don't like show the whites of your eyes type stuff, right? So it's like those. I mean, so those are the types of stutterers. They you know, I can't say there's like a particular sort of a particular type. I know that for me though, on certain, I mean, it just really depends on like the certain day and what that situation is. Sometimes I'll stutter on consonants. Sometimes will stutter on words that begin with a vowel sound. Um, but the main thing for me is, and this is what I've been like kind of like telling folks, is that I'm trying to tell myself that I should not, that my goal should not be to not stutter. My goal should be to stutter better, right? I'm trying to stutter better. I'm trying to be more, I'm trying to be more comfortable when I stutter. I'm trying to
Chris,
stutter
I
in a
like
way.
that. I
Yeah,
really like that. Say that
yeah.
again. I really like that.
Girl, I'm marveling over here. I'm like, what? But this can apply to so many different things in life.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's it's. I mean, it's something that I've like. It's it's been part of sort of the journey of self discovery that I also tell folks. Like I'm a believer as well, right? So like I realized that I really had to find myself. Like as I started to go through this journey of being a person who stuttered, I was like, okay, now I'm accepting this identity of being a person who stutters. Now I need to realize, well, no, because this is what I talk about sometimes too. I said, as a believer, I know that I'm still in God.
Right.
It doesn't matter about my stutter because because God was not surprised by my stutter, right? Like the plan that He had for me before I knew me, um, that included my stutter.
That's right.
And in actuality, even taking it a step further, I was talking to a pastor friend of mine some years ago, and he told me because it ended up manifesting. He told me, he said the very thing you think is holding you back will be the very thing God uses to propel you.
Finish you
Um,
for. That's
yeah.
it. I love it.
And
I love it.
those words have manifested where my stutter, because of my stutter, I got to, I've had opportunities to go on TV and do things that I never thought I would ever do, is speak on television, stutter on television, right? Speak on television here at Fox 5 in DC, um, News 12 in Long Island. These are all through sort of personal relationships I've had with friends that know I stutter and have known me. One friend's known me. He was my first friend in private school in sixth grade, right? Like this was sort of like, this was just sort of experiences I had. But I say all that to say that I realize, like I said, for what you were asking before, that my goal, like before when I started this journey sort of in 2020 with the speech therapist, I was like, I need to go see a speech therapist because I don't want to stutter no more. Right?
Oh,
Like I don't want to stutter no more. Like I pray to God to like take away my stutter and do all
wow.
that, right? I was like, I don't want to stutter no more. But as I started to go through the process, I realized, you know what? My goal should not be to not stutter. My goal should be to stutter better. My goal should be to stutter in a way that it does not hurt my mental, my emotional. It does not make me feel like I'm less of than anybody. It's just something that's a part of the way I speak sometimes. But it does not affect what God's plan is for me. It does not affect what success I can make because look where I am now. Like where I am now, I never thought when I was 3, 5 years old, having this stutter, that I would have been able to do the things I've been able to do. I'm still just in my, I mean, I'm still, I'm not like, I'm not out here on the cover of Black Enterprise or nothing, but
Not yet.
considering,
Not yet.
Right.
not yet, right? Let's speak those things that are not as if they are, right?
Absolutely.
But but really, really for what I am, I've been able to go, to college, to business school, get married, make babies, you know what I'm saying? Like have a good
Accomplish
sort of
things.
career and accomplishments and things that, for a kid who was, who grew up in the South Bronx and, had friends, just sort of unfortunately, the normal narrative of, like being raised in a single parent home in, the South Bronx with friends who were kids who was like dealing drugs, got killed, and unfortunately, the normal narrative. I was part of that normal narrative in that neighborhood, but I had a family that was a praying family, who had their flaws, but they loved me, they supported me, they cheered me on,
Mhm.
and I never thought I would get to this place. So all this is with the stutter. You know what I'm saying? All this
Mhm.
is with the
Look
stutter.
at
So
God. Look at God.
yeah, yeah. So
This,
I.
yeah. And
Were
this
you
is
ever
just,
bullied?
Hmm?
Were you ever bullied?
Um, not
I'm like, who wasn't
bullied,
though?
not bullied, maybe like teased
I mean, well,
Tease,
sometimes,
tease,
yeah.
okay. Yeah.
teased sometimes,
Well,
but not
yeah, because
bullied.
bullied is a new word. We got teased back in the
We
day.
Yeah, we
everybody
got
got
teased back in the day,
teased.
yeah.
mhm.
And
But
when you thought you were
but
perfect, you got teased. Everybody had some type of
That's
imperfection.
right. Yeah, it's
but
bullying
but I
now. Okay.
Because they
I
go,
will say though that I did not get teased nearly as much as you would think.
Mhm.
right.
And because I gotta be honest, like I could sit up here and tell that story like, oh, I got teased every day and I ran home from school crying. No, I was actually friends with everybody.
That's me. Mhm.
I was friends with everybody, right? I might have got sort of, teased sometimes, whatever, but I was always a pretty likable kid
Mhm.
and got along with everybody. When I say everybody, like I got along with the kids who were like the good students because I was a good student, but I also got along with the bad kids because I was funny. So
Mhm.
it's like
And you got to
I
be
was
able to dish that thing back. So when you are joned on, like how we used to say
Mhm.
joning,
Yeah.
you got to be able to give it back because everybody got something that they can be joned on about. But
you
Right.
got to absolutely,
these days
absolutely.
is called bullying, but sometimes
Right.
bullying has gone further. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think everybody was somewhat teased back in the
Yep.
day.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's
But I
Yeah.
definitely
will
right.
ask this. I mean, I know we're closing. This has been so great, and I did want to put on it
Hmm.
that Joyce Cox, who recommended you
I
to us.
Joyce, yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. She's a
Yeah, she
sweetheart.
recommended.
Love
So this is
Joyce.
what she said.
Yeah.
But also, I wanted to, in closing, I wanted to ask you, do you think it's better for kids just starting out and parents just starting out? Do you think it's better to kind of tackle this issue early on? Or, and I know you got to it a little later because some may look at it and say, is this a disability? Some may say that I don't really think that's a disability because we all knew people that stuttered, but like you said, there's a spectrum as
Mhm.
well. But what would you advise students as well as parents?
Hmm.
Would you advise them to kind of jump on this early, kind of get a handle on this? And because for me, that builds the confidence. But what would you
Hmm.
advise them to do?
Yes, yes, yes. I absolutely would advocate for people to get a jump on it early on in life. The reason why I would say that is because for me, I actually think what's equally as important as sort of the mechanics of like addressing the stuttering is really the social emotional piece. The
Mhm.
social emotional piece that comes as a result of stuttering um, can be so deep seated and so damaging if left unchecked. And it doesn't start when you're an adult. That social emotional pain, that effect begins when you are a child and it
Mhm.
stays with you and grows in the background. And it manifests in lots of different ways that, like, to certain people, it looks like a child is misbehaving. It looks like
Hmm.
a child is distant, is disconnected,
Or they
or right.
become
But it's,
bullies.
yeah. But it's
Mhm.
really coming from a
Yeah.
social emotional piece where like that really needs to be addressed. I sat in a room with men who stuttered, and there was one brother. We were all in like a smaller groups, and this one brother talked about, never forget, because I always bring it up when I can, when I'm sort of like talking with folks. This one brother said, for years, he did not want to have a child because he was afraid to pass on his stutter to his
Mm.
child, and did not want his child to have the same, to go through the same pain that he went through as a
Mm.
child and throughout his life. That is how
Oh,
serious the social emotional piece is, for people, right? That's how serious it is, that it will actually affect your life choices.
mhm.
It will cause you to not do things that can bring you joy in life and bring joy to the world, because of this pain that you've been carrying since you were a child.
Wow. Are you ever concerned with your children, with their
Um,
speech?
no, it's like it's the reason I laugh is because I have two girls, and neither of my girls stutter, but my youngest, for a long time, she had like a different way that she just like pronounced words. Her teachers at school like would said that she sounds like she's from Long Island, like the way she would like just pronounce words, like certain words. Um, to the point where they were like talking to us about like her seeing a like speech therapist, and I don't know, something in me just rose up, and I said, hell no. I said, she speak just fine. I said, she ain't got
Right.
no problem. I said, I understand her perfectly. I said,
Right.
perfectly. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I said it to my wife, and my wife was like, all right, okay, man, chill. I was just asking. I
Right.
was like, ain't nothing wrong with that. I said, ain't nothing wrong with that. Hey, you tell him I said that. You tell him I said that. I was, you know, but like, so like one day, we walked past her room, and she was on her little tablet, and she just kept saying this word. She was like, world, world. And then afterwards we asked, we're like, hey, what was going on in there? And she said, I was trying to say world to my iPad because I was trying to find something. She said, but my iPad can't understand my language. She said, my iPad doesn't understand my language. I said, no problem, babe. I said, keep saying it so your iPad will learn your language.
Right.
I said, you ain't
Right.
got to change nothing.
I love
Um,
That's
it.
right.
you
I
know, I
love
mean,
it.
but now she's, now she's sort of quote unquote grown out of how she used to pronounce words,
Yeah.
a little better now. But yeah, I was like, I haven't had it, but you asking that just brought that up, and that
Yeah.
thing triggered me. That thing set me off. I was about to go down to school and 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 cuss them out in every stuttering word I could
Right.
find.
Yeah, Lord. Well, we definitely, Chris, we enjoyed this interview. I
Yes.
mean, this has been awesome. And I definitely want to give Madeline and Bunny something to say and you to close us out. But this has been really awesome. And I think just like with anything else, I think this disability, it could work for you, but it can work against you. I love the way that you made it work for you.
Hmm.
And
Mhm.
you didn't, the older you got, it's like you had to know more about it. And I love, see, now I'm that type of person too that's always going to ask a lot of questions and try to figure out something. But I love the way that you approach it because, again, I think we all have some imperfection in our life, whether
Mhm.
it's physical or it's another intellectual. Sometimes it's something that we know everybody else may not even know, but we want to know why that is. So we can even make that a strength or we can make that a weakness. And again, I just love the way that you took this and you made this a strength. So I encourage you to keep encouraging others to make it a
Thank
strength as
you.
well. Bonnie?
Mhm.
This has been amazing. Um, Chris, I don't think I've ever met anyone other than the classmate back in junior high school that has a stutter. And I'm 57 years old.
Hmm.
So it has been awesome talking with you, seeing that you've learned how to live and to be comfortable with your stutter. That's just amazing when we can step into who God made us and not what the world wants us to be. So I love that you are spreading that to the community to let them know that there's nothing wrong with the stutter. As long as you're okay with it, we have to be okay with it. And I totally understand because my grandson is autistic and we have to step into his world. So I definitely understand. I have enjoyed this. I had so many questions, but I'm gonna let him go. But this has been amazing.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for sharing your journey. I appreciate it.
Yes, this has been remarkable, and I have to say this: listening to you, as a little person, a lot of things you said, I'm taking it in and taking, you know, going with it. So it's not even just with you having a problem with stuttering; it's your motivation. It's how you took it and said, "All right." But you continued on, and like I said, you're married with kids, and you're going around doing speeches and helping younger kids, especially. And to be honest, I was thinking, even in the black community, with some kids, males especially, stuttering, they're gonna really need your help with that because of how, like you said, the social and emotional part. But again, I thank you, and just keep soaring like you are.
Amen. Thank you for that.
So, Chris, we're going to let you close us out. And again, we
Mhm.
just want to thank you for joining us. Just give those parents out there some words of encouragement, or out some of those people that's suffering in silence. If you can just
Yeah,
give them some encouraging words.
sure. So sure. I would definitely say that to the people who do stutter, to know that you are not alone. Because sometimes, like the hardest part is thinking you're the only person. A lot of times, when you're a person who stutters, um, a lot of times you're the only person in your world who stutters. So you think you're the only one, and it's very hard. So it can be a lonely place. So one, to know that you're not by yourself. Find your tribe. You have a tribe of folks who also stutter, who are willing to support and to reach out, and to also, but also to know, that that God's plan for your life included your stutter. So so nothing changes about how you are a masterpiece, according to Ephesians 2:20, I believe, maybe 2:20 or 2:10. But we are God's masterpiece, created, right? He created us to walk in the good things that he planned for us. That means with all your imperfections, you are still a masterpiece. We are all still masterpieces. For those parents of children who stutter, continue to give them space, um, but really make them feel like they can stutter, and that they're not emotionally punished for stuttering. So that, because, as I said, the most important thing should not be to try to get your child to not stutter, but it should be to make your child feel more comfortable about who they are, even with the stutter. So to not make them feel like the stutter makes them any less than who they are. So with that, I'll bid you all adieu. And again, I appreciate the invitation for
Thank you.
this. Would love if you all know of any other folks who who I can definitely spread some word and some support to in kids in schools. Please do. Please feel free to reach out to me. Because I would love to be able to just continue to pour into folks, because it actually also blesses me to do that.
I know that's right,
Good,
Chris.
thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Listen,
Thank
we owe him an offering.
We
He done
sure
took us
do.
to church. He opened up the Bible.
I tell, I tell, I tell you what, better the last session I did it was all us in there. It was like black and brown folks in there. And at the end of it, tell me why somebody asked me to close us out in prayer. So we
Okay.
so we straight up so we straight up in one of these conference rooms, like off like having a session praying. Like we definitely we all like prayed us out the room.
I
It's
know
like,
that's right.
No,
so
definitely.
fun. Yeah.
But thank you guys so much. You guys have a wonderful weekend. And
Yes.
again,
Thank
Chris, thank you
you.
for joining us. This was
Thank
so
thank you so
awesome.
much.
Yes. Thank you. All right.
All
Take
right,
care.
bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.